Welcome to today's video where I will be making my first totem piece. I've already prepared this solid walnut piece of wood by placing some tar on it. I had tried to put some concrete and rusty metal onto the wood, but it did not adhere to it, which you can see in a previous video. After that failed, I went ahead and applied some tar. I let that dry, and I decided to go ahead and use the piece of concrete with the metal in it, and I'm going to adhere it using the encaustic wax. At this point, I decided to warm up the walnut with my blowtorch. I tried to not fuse, I tried to warm it up lightly because I wasn't sure how flammable that tar would be. My intention was to create a totem, so I did want to cover all of the sides with the encaustic, but as it turns out, I waited and did the back side very last. Again, using my torch to fuse the encaustic on all of the sides, it was neat to watch it interact with the tar. This was my first time using tar in any of my encaustic work. My intent was to use the encaustic to adhere the concrete and metal piece onto the totem. So I went ahead and put fresh encaustic down on the wood as well as the back of the concrete, pushing those together, applying some pressure, and then adding some encaustic to the edges to secure that into place. The piece of metal that is in the concrete is not actually resting on the wood. There's a gap, and I'm concerned that if anything pushes on that metal, that it might snap it off of there. So I tried to apply some encaustic to the backside of that, tried to get it to run down in there and provide a little extra support for that piece of rusty metal. I applied some additional encaustic to the sides and then needed to give that a quick fuse. And then at this point decided to add a little bit of the white encaustic to try to create a little bit of contrast on the piece. I was also hoping that some of the oils from the tar would bleed through the encaustic layers and give some tone to that white encaustic, which did happen a little bit as I continued to work the piece. Again, my first time using the tar, so I wasn't sure how those things would interact, and so a lot of this was just experimenting and checking it out. Realized I got a little more of the white than I anticipated, so I went ahead and was scraping some of that back off. At this point, I wanted to add a little pop of color, so I created some colors using these three paints. I did not use that phthalo green. I held that up there by accident, but mixed all of these up to make a blue that I thought would go well with the tones of the tar. At this point, I realized I had meant to scratch some marks into the wax and forgotten to do that. So, as is often the case, I will put the paints on and then make the marks. Sometimes it kind of helps me see them a little bit better, so that I know where I'm placing them. For anyone who may be watching me for the first time, I do use vegetable oil as my blending medium for a lot of my different things that I apply to my pieces. The vegetable oil is something that's not going to hurt me or the environment very much, and it's easy to clean up, and it's also cost effective. So I like to use that instead of the harsh chemicals. At this point, as I was looking at the piece, I realized I wanted to have a more tactile experience with it. So I decided to add some small rusty finishing nails to the walnut piece. Had some trouble with my camera, so I have a section here that I didn't get to record where I added this piece of fabric to the edge. Again, just wanting to build on the composition and add another dimension and another visual aid to the look of this totem. Picked up several of these small silicone tools at the dollar stores, here or there, sometimes at flea markets when I see them. They really come in handy to get into some small places. I also wanted to add this piece that was going to create some movement. That walnut is a very hard wood, so I had to drill a pilot hole in order to be able to put that screw in there for this wing nut. At least I think that's what that is. I'm not really sure. I realized I was getting closer to having this done, but it still just didn't feel quite complete to me. So I just continued to work the piece, decided I wanted to add a little texture and color to this fabric. So have this transparent earth orange. I at first added a little white to that, but then once I got it on there, I thought it was maybe a little too pale. So I went back over with just the paint itself, the transparent orange. Again, trying to add a little dimension to the color. As is often the case with my pieces, I'm always adding marks on multiple layers and with several different kinds of tools. So no different here. Just continue to use different things to make some marks and get that oil paint into those marks. It was definitely challenging working around the nails and the wing nut and the metal that was lifted up off of the wood there. My paper towel got stuck underneath there, so I had to get some tweezers to pull that out. Um, but in the end, I really do love how this piece turned out and in the direction that it's going. This point, I decided to start working the back of the piece. I knew I was getting close to being done with it and wasn't quite sure how I wanted to finish it just yet, but knew I needed to get encaustic on the back and get that started. I decided this time to support that other end so that it would be more level as it cooled. Now I'm going back to that sisal fiber. It's an all natural fiber. I found it at an on an Etsy or in an Etsy shop. Um, Again, I put some fresh wax down and pushed the sisal fiber onto it and then dabbed more wax on top of it. And then, of course, I will fuse that in order to get that secure onto the piece. Sometimes this fiber will heat up and change colors. You have to be cautious so you don't catch it on fire. But I do kind of like the effect when it changes colors. I used some wax paper and a brayer to make sure that that was secure on there as the wax cooled so that it would not come off later. I thought maybe that it was done at this point, but as I continued to look at it from all sides, I decided it needed at least one more element. And I got out some of my thread and went ahead and dipped the end of it into the encaustic to tack it down while I started spinning that thread around there and just again adding one more element to the totem. Well, I think that that finished this piece up, and this is how it ended up. Thank you for joining me. I hope you'll come back again. I've got another project on the table, and I'll have that video out soon. Thanks for joining me.